Hello students, welcome back to our business class again, business law group. Today's topic is nationalization of banks in India. So let's continue. So, nationalization of banks was the initiative of Indira Gandhi ji in the year 1969. So as she said, as early as December 1954, Parliament took the decision to frame our plans and policies within a socialist pattern of society. Control over the commanding heights of the economy is necessary, particularly in a poor country where it is extremely difficult to mobilize adequate resources for development and to reduce inequalities between different groups and regions. Now, this was the statement given by our great lady leader of our country, the only one with a strong motive and a powerful determination to make India a great country. She took many big decisions, and those decisions are still valid because those decisions were taken for the benefit of our society, since we live in a socialist pattern of society. That means what? There should not be concentration of money into few hands, like small industry, like the industrialists. If that happens, then the poor people will suffer a lot in our country. So that's this nationalization of banks was one of the best decisions ever made, ever taken by government of India. So let's see, students, the advantages of nationalization of banks in our country. What was its objectives and how far this nationalization of banks was successful so far. So let's see. So under Indira Gandhi's rule, 14 major private sector banks were nationalized to guarantee financial security. So after the nationalization, the newspaper item appeared, which was published by the Times of India on July 20th, 1969. It says 14 top banks are nationalized. Ordinance follows unanimous cabinet decision. So it was the decision of unanimous cabinet. Okay, so let's see now how the banks were nationalized and what was the main objective behind nationalization of banks in India. So after independence, India adopted a socialist pattern of society as its goal. The issue of bank nationalization dates back to 1948. The nationalization of RBI in 1949 was the first step. We have already seen RBI, establishment of RBI and its powers and functions. In 1955, the Imperial Bank of India was nationalized and was taken over by the State Bank of India and its 7 subsidiaries. Now, this was the step of nationalization of all the major banks so that the socialist pattern comes to life in our Indian society. There were many complaints against the scheduled commercial banks as they were favoring large and medium scale industries and big business houses, and they neglected the agricultural and small scale industries. This was the major reason why banks had to be nationalized, because the banks before nationalizations, they did not favor these agricultural and small scale industries. They favored only the large business houses and large scale industries. Now if that happens, then capitalization may take place, and then The poor people will remain poor. So this was the danger. And to overcome this particular danger, Indira Gandhi government took the decision of nationalization of banks. Let's see. There were two phases of nationalization. Initially, 14 major banks, scheduled banks were nationalized, and thereafter 6 more were nationalized. Let us see one by one. So first installment of nationalization. On July 6, 1969, the government of India issued ordinance to take over of 14 major scheduled commercial banks with more than 50 crore of deposits with effect from 1969. These 14 banks were as under: the Central Bank of India Limited, the Bank of India Limited, the Punjab National Bank Limited, the Bank of Baroda Limited, the United Commercial Bank Limited, the Canara Bank Limited, the United Bank of India Limited, the Dena Bank Limited, the Syndicate Bank Limited, Union Bank of India Limited, Allahabad Bank Limited, the Indian Bank Limited, the Bank of Maharashtra Limited, and the Indian Overseas Bank Limited. The nationalization bill was passed by the Parliament as the Banking Companies Acquisition and Transfer of Undertaking Act 1969 and received President's assent on 9th August 1969. So students, somebody has beautifully drawn the names as in a tree formation, the names of all 14 banks which were scheduled banks which were nationalized. So these are the names of the banks just announced or discussed by us. Let's see. Let's go ahead. Now, there was hue and cry from all these scheduled banks and all the private industrial people and all those who had suffered or who had to give up their business to in the hands of government of India because of the nationalization, because now they cannot do whatever they want. They wanted the power, the money power into their few hands so that they could become a monopolist, a capitalist, and rule this country with their powerful money. So they started taking objections against this ordinance of nationalization of banks. Petitions challenging the competence of ordinance were filed in the Supreme Court on 21st July 1969. The Banking Company Act 1969 was also challenged in the Supreme Court about its validity. An ad interim injunction was granted by the Supreme Court against the operation of the Act. So, for the time being, the operation of the Act was stopped. The Supreme Court bench of 11 judges decided the petition on 10th February 1970, holding by the majority of 10:1 that the Act was void, and it's entirely for the following reason. The Act makes hostile discrimination against the named banks and prohibits them from carrying on banking business, whereas other banks, Indian and foreign banks, are permitted to function, and also new banks were also formed. So there was a discrimination against all those 14 banks. It restricts the named banks from carrying on business of banking. The principles adopted by determining the compensation to the 14 banks were illusory and irrelevant. This was the objection, and these were the reason given by the court why the act was held void. Okay, let's go ahead. Yet another ordinance. So after that, there was one more ordinance passed by the government, superseding the decision of the Supreme Court. Now let us see what is that. President of India promulgated another ordinance on 14th February 1970 and renationalized the 14 major banks by removing the main objections of hostile discrimination and illusory compensation raised by the Supreme Court. So both these things were removed, and as a justification, they renationalized 14 banks. Then the ordinance received assent of the President on March 31st, 1970. The new act was named as the Banking Companies Acquisition and Transfer of Undertaking Act 1970. Now there was a second time second you can see installment of bank nationalization. 11 years after nationalization of 14 commercial banks, 6 more banks were nationalized in 1980 with effect from April 15, 1980. This was done by issue of ordinance and then the enactment of the Banking Companies Acquisition and Transfer of Undertakings Act 1980. These banks were the Andhra Pradesh Bank Limited, Corporation Bank Limited, the New Bank of India Limited, the Oriental Bank of Commerce Limited, the Punjab and Sindh Bank Limited, and Vijaya Bank Limited. New Bank of India was merged in 1993 in the Punjab National Bank, which was nationalized in 1969. At present, there are 19 nationalized banks. So out of these 6, one has been already merged with Punjab National Bank. Let's go ahead. Now, these were the three initial, 6 initial banks, okay, which were nationalized after 11 years of those nationalization of those 14 scheduled banks, right? Okay, what were the objectives behind nationalization of banks in India? The rationale behind nationalization was stated by the Prime Minister of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi ji in the Parliament as under. So this was the justification given by her. Why she took that, or her cabinet took the decision of nationalization of the banks. She says the government felt that the public ownership and control of commanding heights of national economy. The nationalization of major banks was felt to be a significant steps in the process of public ownership of the principal institution for the mobilization of people's savings and channelizing them towards productive purpose. So they thought, the government thought that whatever investment is done in these particular banks, they have to be taken control by the government and use or utilize these or channelize the savings for the productive purpose, for the betterment of the society. The government felt that the public ownership of the major banks will help in the most effective mobilization and development of national resources so that our objectives can be realized with a great degree of assurance. Now, this was the explanation given by the great Prime Minister Indira Gandhi ji against, in favor of nationalization of banks. Right. The aim of the Banking Companies Acquisition and Transfer of Undertakings Act 1970. The main aim of the Act was to control the heights of the economy and to meet progressively and serve better the needs of the development of the economy in conformity with national policy and objectives. Aims and objectives of nationalization of banks: elimination of concentration of economic power in few hands, diversification of the flow of bank economic credit towards priority sectors such as agriculture, small industries, exports, weaker section, backward areas, fostering of new classes of entrepreneurs so as to create sustain and accelerate economic growth, professionalization of bank management, providing adequate training as well as reasonable terms of service to bank staff, extending banking facilities to unbanked rural areas and semi-rural areas. This was a very, very important step taken by the government of India at that time, because without which the rural areas and the unbanked rural areas would not have been developed so far. Now the new leaders beat drums saying that we did this, we did that. But actually, without these kind of steps which took place somewhere immediately after the independence, if these steps were not taken by the government of India, nothing would have been possible so far. Right? Okay. Extending banking facilities to these areas, and then to curb the use of bank credit for speculative and other unproductive purposes. That means what? All these nationalized banks today, they invest into only and only the government sector industries, and those industries which make profit and profit only, like for example, Life Insurance Corporation of India, or any other sector, public sector, in which these banks, these nationalized banks, invest their money so that they get a guaranteed income. So that was the reason behind the nationalization. Otherwise, these scheduled banks, unnationalized banks would have been at loss today, and would have been not at loss actually. They would have flourished, and they would have not taken care of rural people, weaker section people, and they would have flourished like anything by themselves, helping all the capitalist people and creating that capitalistic class. And the other classes would have suffered a heavy loss. Let's go ahead. Arguments in favor of the nationalization. Some people say nationalization would enable the government to obtain all the large profits of the banks as its revenue, thus creating a new resource for financing the plan. So government can use the revenue which is generated from these nationalized banks and use that revenue for the betterment of the society, for the welfare of the society. Nationalization would safeguard and promote the interest of the deposit. If it would promote the confidence of the public in the bank, it would prevent bank failures and strengthen the banking system. Nationalization would certainly remove the concentration of economic power in the hands of few industrialists. Nationalization would help in stabilizing the price levels by eliminating artificial scarcity of essential goods, by not allowing building up inventories and hoardings, as well as speculative activities. So these were the arguments in favor to be continued. Further, it is said that nationalization would compel banks to lend to priority sectors such as agriculture, small-scale industry, transport operators, retail trade, small business, professional and self-employed persons, and education, which under the influence of traditional and vested interests would deny adequate access to the banking system. So earlier, these facilities were not provided by the banks, federal banks, because they were not concerned, and they considered investing in these kind of areas as loss to them. They never trusted these areas. So government understood that, government realized this particular danger, and then it took the step of nationalization of banking system in India, right? So that the government of India can take care of these areas now. Okay, nationalization would check favorable attitude of the banks towards directors by providing credits at concessional rates. Nationalization eliminates wasteful competition and raises the efficiency of the working of the banks. Nationalized banks need not compete with anyone because it's a government entity. Nationalization would bring a rapid increase in the number of banking offices in the rural, semi-urban areas and help in deposit mobilization to a greater extent. Nationalization is necessary for the furtherance of socialism and in the interest of community. Nationalization would enable the RBI to implement its monetary policy more effectively. Nationalization would replace the profit motive by service motive in the functioning of the banks to help achieve the goal of socialism. Distribution of credit by the nationalized bank would be much more efficient. Nationalization would secure standardization of banking services in the country. Nationalization would bring down the excessive emoluments of the top executives of some private banks who were receiving unduly salaries. Wide disparities would be removed if the banks were under the state control. So there are so many reasons behind why the nationalization of banks took place. That decision was taken by the government of India because it wanted to safeguard the interests of the society at large and to prevent concentration of money in the people's money into the hands of few industrialists and to look after these people. Now let us come to the arguments against nationalization. So there were some people who were against it. They said nationalization involves huge amounts of money to be paid as compensation to the shareholders. Then extending loans to agricultural and small-scale industries is risky and less numerative, such as loans are against sound banking system. Nationalization may not lead to socialism as state capitalism is not socialism. The property may get misused and destroyed like anything. There is no need to such drastic step of bank nationalization to curb malpractices of privately owned banks, as they can be checked by appropriate or adopting appropriate monetary and fiscal policies and through supervision of RBI. So, students, here is one interesting cartoon. It says, you can see Mrs. Indira Gandhi ji has come to withdraw money, overdraft, and one person is shouting from here. He says that when that lady withdraws, it's always the whole bank. That means what she says that she has, though she has come to withdraw money, but she is not going to withdraw up to the limit of her savings. She is going to over withdraw and withdraw the entire bank itself. Such an interesting cartoon. What an artist. Hats off to the cartoonist. Thank you so much. Let us continue. The nationalization of commercial banks will reduce the efficiency of these banks, as political interference will impair the functioning of the bank. These were the arguments against nationalization. Again, somebody said that nationalization is not the remedy of growth of monopoly, and the concentration of wealth and power as the root cause for them lies in the existing economic system. No additional security to depositors in India can be provided through nationalization, as there is institutions like Indian Deposit Insurance and Credit Guarantee Corporation. As to the reference to foreign countries, banks in Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark are in private hands and functioning efficiently, they said. Controlled by RBI, the executives and other officials of banks are afraid to take decisions which have naturally affected adversely and slowed down the services to the customers. Through nationalization, public control leaves the doors of banks open for corruption and favoritism. Rapid expansion of branches, establishment costs have risen, as the structure of salaries and wages do not make any real distinction between urban and the rural banking. Under public sector banking, interstate rivalries and policies would raise their ugly heads, damaging the present sound banking system under the private sector. So that's all, students. And in the end, I found this picture on Google under images, which says that Indira's bank nationalization move, why Modi hasn't reversed it. That means what? That means her decision is still correct. Otherwise, Modi government would have reversed it. So he also understands that there was a need for nationalization of banks. So thank you, students. See you in our next class.